Hello Year 5, welcome to some more reading of our class yearbook, The Butterfly Lion. So Miss Bradford read the last chapter where the white lion came back to Bertie. He couldn't make it in the wild on his own. I suppose he'd spent all of his childhood kind of being raised by the family, so he didn't really know how to hunt, how to look after himself, and he's now gone with the Frenchman to the circus in France, but it seems like the Frenchman seems quite nice. He said the lion would never go hungry again. Fingers crossed that things work out for the white lion cub and for Bertie, who has set sail to go to boarding school in England. The next chapter is called Strawbridge, which is an unusual title, isn't it? I wonder what will happen in this chapter. Will it talk about Bertie's life in boarding school in England? I think his mum mentioned, right at the start of the story that he didn't really have a happy time. Will he go to France to find his white lion cub? Will his white lion cub be okay? So lots of questions to think about as we go into the chapter Strawbridge. The old lady drank her tea and wrinkled her nose in disgust. "I'm always doing that," she said. "I'm always letting my tea go cold." The dog scratched his ear, groaning with the pleasure of it, but eyed me all the time. So we've gone back to kind of present day with the boy at the start of the book who had run away from boarding school and met the old lady who was retelling her time in Africa and about her son Bertie. "Is that the end then?" I asked. She laughed and put down her cup. "I should say not," she said. And then she went on, picking a tea leaf off the tip of her tongue. This is when tea used to be made with the tea leaves kind of out of the bag. "Up till now, it's been just Bertie's story. He told it to me so often that I almost feel I was there when it happened. But from now on, it's my story too." "What about the white lion? I had to know. Did he find the white lion? Did he keep his promise?" The old lady seemed suddenly clouded with sadness. You must remember," she said, putting a bony hand on mine, "that true stories do not always end just as we wish them to. Would you like to hear the truth of what happened? Or shall I make something up for you just to keep you happy?" "I want to know what really happened," I replied. "Then you shall," she said. She turned from me and looked out of the window again at the butterfly line, still blue and shimmering on the hillside. Oh, Year 5, I don't think this is going to have a happy ending. We'll keep going though. Okay. Whilst Bertie was growing up on his farm in Africa with his fence all around, I was growing up here at Strawbridge in this echoing cold cavern of a house with its deer park and its high wall all around. And I grew up for the most part alone. I too was an only child. So this now is the older lady retelling her story when she was a child. So she grew up in England, feeling quite alone on her own. "My mother had died giving birth to me, and father was rarely at home. Maybe that's why the two of us, Bertie and I, got on so well from the moment we met. We had so much in common from the very start. Like Bertie, I scarcely ever left the confines of my own home, so I had few friends. I didn't go to school either, not to start with. I had a governess instead, Miss Tulips. Everyone called her No Lips because she was so thin-lipped and severe. So this lady didn't go to school. She had a lady come to the house and kind of teach her things, but this very thin-lipped and severe lady. She moved around the house like a cold shadow. She lived on the top floor like cook and like nanny. Nanny Mason, bless her heart, brought me up and taught me all the do's and don'ts of life like all good nannies should. But she was more than just a nanny to me. She was a mother to me, and a wonderful one too. The best I could have had, the best anyone could have had." So this lady got brought up with by a nanny, meaning someone who kind of comes in and is paid to look after you. "My mornings were always spent at study with No Lips, but all the while I was looking forward to my afternoons walking with Nanny Mason, except on Sundays when I was allowed to be on my own all day. If father wasn't home for the weekend, which he usually wasn't, then I could fly my kites when it was fine and read my books when it wasn't. I loved my books. Black Beauty, Little Woman, Heidi. I loved them all because they took me outside the park walls. They took me all over the world. Through my books, I met my best friends. I remember it was just after my 10th birthday. It was Sunday and I was out flying my kite. But there wasn't much wind, and no matter how hard I ran, I just couldn't even get my best box kite to catch the wind and fly. I climbed all the way up to Wood Hill looking for wind, and there at the top I found it at last, enough to send my kite soaring. But then the wind gusted and my kite swirled away crazily towards a tree. I couldn't get it in time. It caught on a branch and stuck fast in a high elm tree amongst the rookery. The rooks flew out, cawing in protest while I tugged at my line, crying in frustration and fury. So she's lost her kite, it's up in the tree, the birds are cawing, and she's trying to get her kite out. That was when I noticed a boy emerging from the shadows of the trees. "I'll get it down for you," he said, and began to climb the tree. Easy as you like. He crawled along the branch, reached out and released my kite. It floated down and landed at my feet. My best kite was torn and battered, but at least I had it back. Then he was down the tree and standing there in front of me. "Who are you? What do you want?" I asked. "I can mend it for you if you like," he said. "Who are you?" I asked again. "Bertie Andrews," he replied. He was wearing a grey school uniform and one I recognised at once. From the Lion Gateway I had often watched them on their walks, 2 by 2, blue school caps, blue socks. "You're from the school up the road, aren't you?" I said. "You won't tell on me, will you?" His eyes were wide with the sudden alarm. I saw then that his legs were scratched and bleeding. "Been in the wars, have you?" I said. "I've run away," he went on, "and I'm not going back, not ever." "Where are you going?" I asked him. He shook his head. "I don't know. In the holidays I live at my auntie's in Strawbridge, but I don't like it there." "Haven't you a proper home?" I asked. Do you know what, Year 5, as I'm reading this, I've realised I've got confused and I've said the wrong things to you. I thought the old lady at the beginning of the story was Bertie's mother because she said "my Bertie," but she just meant either her friend or maybe they grow up and become husband and wife, I don't know. So this lady retelling the story isn't Bertie's mother, sorry. She is a friend of Bertie's, someone that met him. So I'm very sorry for my confusion when reading this, but I don't think it takes away from the story. It just means we have to reconfigure, we have to rethink in our head who's narrating the story. So now it's the old lady who's telling us about when she was young and when she met Bertie from Africa for the first time when he was in boarding school in England. Okay, let's go. "Haven't you got a proper home?" I said. "Course I have," he replied. "Everyone has, but it's in Africa." The whole afternoon we sat together on Wood Hill and he told me all about Africa, about his farm, about his waterhole and about his white lion and how he was somewhere in France now in a circus and how he couldn't bear to think about him. "But I'll find him," he said fiercely. "I'll find him somehow." To be honest, I wasn't sure how much I really believed all this about a white lion. I just didn't think lions could be white. "But the trouble is," he went on, "even when I do find him, I won't be able to take him home to Africa like I always wanted to." "Why not?" I asked. "Because my mother died." "Oh." He looked down and pawed at the grass beside him. "She had malaria, but I think she really died of a broken heart." When he looked up, his eyes were swimming with tears. "You can, you know. Then my father sold the farm and married someone else. I never want to go back. I never want to see him again. Never." "Oh, Year 5. So since Bertie's left Africa, his mother's died. They say of malaria, which is a disease that you can catch, but he thinks it's from a broken heart because he doesn't live with her anymore, and his father's sold that farm and got remarried." I wanted to say how sorry I was about his mother, but I couldn't find the right words to say. "You really live here, do you?" he said. "Is that in that big place? It's as big as my school." I told him then that there was... Sorry, Year 5. I told him then what little there was to know of me, all about my father being away in London and about No Lips and Nanny Mason. He sucked at the purple clover flower as I talked, and when neither of us had anything to say, we lay back in the sun and watched a pair of mewing buzzards wheeling overhead. I was wondering what would happen to him if he got caught. What are you going to do? I said at last. Won't you get into trouble? Only if they catch me, he said. But they will. They're bound to in the end, I said. You've got to go back before they miss you. After a while, he propped himself up on his elbow and looked down at me. Maybe you're right, he said. Maybe they won't have missed me yet. Maybe it's not too late. But if I go back, could I come again? I can't face it. I can face it if I can come again. Would you let me? I'll mend your kite. Really, I will. And he gave me a smile so melting that I couldn't refuse him. So it was arranged. He would meet me under the big elm on Wood Hill every Sunday afternoon at 3, or as close to 3 p.m. as he could. He would have to come through the woods so that he could never be seen from the house. I knew full well that if No Lips ever found out, there'd be hell to pay, for both of us probably. Bertie shrugged and said that if he got caught, all they could do at school was beat him, and that once more wouldn't make any difference. And if they expelled him, well, that would suit him fine. And that is the end of our chapter. So again, sorry for my confusion when I've been reading this year 5, but I think it makes more sense now, doesn't it? That this lady is now an older lady, and she's found a boy who has run away from school and is retelling him the story of a boy she met when she was younger who ran away from the boarding school, who we know as Bertie, and as we know, Bertie spent that time in Africa. Okay, right, no more confusion. Let's look forward to Miss Bradford reading the next one, and All's Well is the name of the chapter. So that sounds good. That sounds promising. Okay, thank you, Year 5. Look forward to reading to you next time.